The cross-examination has just started with the chief medical examiner. Mark Amara has started to ask her now, was she appointed by the lead prosecutor in this case? Listen to what's happening now. Just started back. Let's listen in.
There was a yes to that. She appointed you to the interim position?
Yes.
And you had another position as a medical examiner in the state of Florida too, correct?
Yes.
That was with the 5th District?
Yes.
But you were not reappointed to that position by the governor, were you?
I did not seek reappointment.
Okay.
It was
That was
stabled.
I'm sorry?
It was stabled. I did not seek reappointment.
And that was because of some of the problems that existed in your administration in that office, was it
Correct.
not? Okay. Yeah, you got the job with Ms. Corey's office, or actually in the same district where she prosecutes, correct?
She's a state, yes, yes.
How much of your work is on behalf of the state attorney's office in that district?
Well, the medical examiner really does not work for the state attorney. We are separate, but most of the time we are called by the state. However, the defense can call us. You could call me on this particular trial, and I would be here for you, just like I'm here for the prosecution.
Totally get that. My question was, how much of your work is on behalf of the state attorney's office in Duval County?
All the homicides.
Okay. All the work, right? You only deal with homicides, right?
No, we do suicides, we do traffic accidents, we do drug overdoses, we do natural death where there is no physician to sign the death certificate. So it's other work. Homicides are a very small percentage of our cases.
I'm sorry, let me clear it up. How much of the work that you do involve crime matters? And I'm presuming in that question that all of your crime matters are dealing with the Duval County State Attorney's Office. So how much of what you do is related to criminal activities? Okay,
so we have a total of 1,165 cases, autopsies.
Okay.
And out of that, we had probably 110 homicides. So that is the proportion.
Okay. And in all of that work, you work with these varied prosecutors, correct?
That is correct.
I mean, these are the homicide prosecutors for that division or that office, right?
Well, we have a whole series of state attorneys, yes.
Okay.
But they are in that office.
So they called you to look at this, correct?
Correct.
Did they have you look at anything having to do with Trayvon Martin?
No. Well, they sent me the autopsy report, so I saw that, yes.
But you're not here to tell us anything about Trayvon Martin. You're just talking about George Zimmerman.
That is correct.
And if I get it right, it's your position that it's at least consistent that George Zimmerman may have only received as little as 3. Did you call, what term did you use, smashing? Or
sorry?
What, slamming. 3 slamming into cement, correct?
I didn't use the word slamming.
I'm sorry, I thought it was your word.
No, I got that from the reenactment.
What word would you use to describe what happened to the head that you say hit cement?
Impact.
Impact. So it's your position that there are at least 3 impacts between that head and cement?
Yes.
Okay.
Concrete.
Concrete. However, and you said it's sort of consistent, so I'm going to walk you through some of that. I'm not going to use pictures right now. Let's just chat a little bit about it, okay? I think you used a suggestion that if you hit yourself in the nose that it could be all one shot, correct?
One blow, correct.
Okay. You're not certainly just suggesting that it was only one blow, correct?
No, but consistent with.
And you say consistent with to minimize the number of shots that it could possibly be, correct?
Not minimize, but if you gave me another scenario, I could look at that scenario and see if it's consistent.
Let me give you this scenario. He gets hit in the nose like this, just like that, but it does not go up here. So here's the first shot, and here's the second shot. How many is that?
2.
Consistent with that picture?
It could be, yes.
Is it any more consistent or any less consistent than the fact that there was one shot?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
I'm sorry. You said earlier that those injuries could be consistent with one shot.
Correct.
And now I think you may have said it could be consistent with 2 shots.
If the way it's depicted, like you depicted, yes.
Well, you don't, just so we're clear, you don't know how Mrs. Zimmerman was hit by Mr. Martin, correct?
Correct.
So you're saying it's consistent with 1, potentially, yes?
Yes.
And it also is consistent with 2, correct?
If the way it was portrayed, yes.
Which you don't know.
Correct.
So could you just say, is it consistent with 2 as well?
It could be, yes.
Okay. And it could be consistent with 1?
Yes.
Okay. And it actually could be consistent with another couple of hits with a palm, or, as you said, another couple of hits with a fist that just didn't leave visible injuries.
Yes.
So you're certainly not telling this jury that Trayvon Martin only hit Mr. Zimmerman in the face one time.
I'm just telling you what the injuries are and what it's consistent with.
Okay. Did you notice in those pictures the cuts on Mr. Martin's knuckle on his left hand, both on the ring finger and a slight one on the pinky?
Okay, those are not cuts, those are abrasions. So, because cut suggests sharp force injury, and they are actually where the skin is rubbed off on Trayvon Martin's hand, correct?
That was a yes? You did notice them?
Yes.
Okay. Are those consistent with striking somebody?
Yes.
So we have some injuries, the only injuries, as a matter of fact, besides the gunshot wound, are 2 injuries on his knuckles, correct?
Correct.
Curious, since you had a chance to look at the autopsy, were there any other injuries on Trayvon Martin at all?
No.
Any bruising injury?
No.
Any laceration injuries?
No.
Any punctate injuries?
No.
So you know for a fact that Trayvon Martin's head or any part of his body was not in contact with cement, correct?
Well, I didn't see any injuries. You can have a contact, but without producing trauma that's visible, so...
As Mr. Zimmerman could have, correct?
Correct.
A dozen of them even, right?
Sorry?
A dozen even, correct?
A dozen what?
Other impacts. Well, let's get more specific. We've now talked about the potential of 2, you would even admit, let me ask you this. Is there a possibility that with a swat or a hit or a fingernail or something, that even this abrasion on his nose could have been a third?
Anything is possible.
Well, you're here as an expert,
Yes.
so I want you to give us your opinion. Is that possible based upon your level of knowledge?
Okay, so I will ask this. I know I'm not supposed to ask you questions,
Go
but
ahead.
you know. So then the next issue would be that each of the punctate marks on his head could have been caused by, you know, a fingernail scratch, or I mean that would be the next question posed. And we're looking at the preponderance of the evidence and the opinion rendered thereby. So, you know, we can continue this.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Yes. Okay.
But we'll spend a moment on the nose. So you saw on Mr. Zimmerman's right side there was a protrusion to his nose, correct?
What does that mean? I don't know.
I'm using the word protrusion. It was the first photograph. Let's go back and see if we can take a quick look at this. You see, you have, we both have one. You have a pointer, correct?
Yes, I do.
You see that spot right there?
That's the abrasion, yes.
No, right below, that little swelling spot right there. Do you see that?
I don't see a spot, but I see swelling, yes.
Swelling, I'm sorry.
Yes.
That swelling to an uninitiated view, actually almost looks like there's a bone over there, doesn't it? But we know it's not, correct?
There is a bone, yes.
Well, but the swelling is not movement of bone, is it? Or is it?
I don't follow that. I'm
Let me just
sorry.
ask you to explain then, what is that swelling on the right side of the nose from?
Okay, so that's trauma, injury.
Okay. And what happens is the body reacts to it by rushing lymph fluid to it and all this other stuff. It sort of tries to take care of the site of injury or trauma.
Yes.
And that recedes pretty quickly, doesn't it?
It depends on the extent of trauma, yes.
Well, and we know in this case, you acknowledge the trauma and the swelling there, right?
Yes.
And you notice in the pictures after it that the swelling has receded, correct?
Yes.
So it does recede after a few hours?
Depending on the severity. Here it was not severe, so the swelling rapidly declined.
And you know that there was blood coming out of the nose as he was standing up, correct?
Correct.
Where do you think that that was bleeding from?
From inside his nose.
And where would that go if he's laying on his back?
Where would what go? I'm sorry.
The blood?
Well, it depends. If you are alive, you would, if it went back in your throat, you would cough it out.
Or swallow it?
Well, I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's going back down your throat.
Yeah, you'd cough it out. I don't know if you would swallow it, but maybe that's a good suggestion.
Okay. So we have the nose injury, one. We have the potential of the injury up here that you identified could be a second shot, correct?
It's possible, yes.
Well, I mean, if I showed you a picture, let's just say that we did, in fact, have a video. And the video showed a smash to the head, to the nose here, and then sort of an overhand. Let's say that it was an overhand shot. You had a video, or let's say an eyewitness who saw an
The testimony
overhand
continues
shot.
with Dr. Rao. She is the chief medical examiner right now under cross-examination. We're going to take a quick break and get back to this testimony and then have analysis with our team to take a look at this key testimony and at least the strategy from both sides. Here, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Testimony continues in the George Zimmerman trial. Dr. Valerie Rao, the chief medical examiner, still on the stand under cross-examination. Let me bring in John Burrs. John, the first question from Mark O'Mara's mouth in this cross-examination was essentially how Dr. Rao got her job, saying that she was appointed by Angela Corey, the state attorney who's the lead prosecutor in this case.
Yeah, what he wants to show to the jury is that she has a bias, that she was hired by the local district attorney and that she's beholden to him, and that the analysis that she has given is consistent with that appointment. It's a classic argument that people make, but at the end of the day, I think that she will overcome that with her own basic testimony that seems to be pretty straight.
And speaking of classic strategies, Mark O'Mara's strategy has been in cross-examination to essentially ask the same question over and over. And with this, Dr. Rao, at one point, he's asking, how does this abrasion happen? Could it happen this way? And she stopped him and said, I know I'm not supposed to ask the questions, but I know you're going to imply that the abrasions could have happened from a scratch or a fingernail, kind of heading him off at the pass. This has been an interesting back and forth.
Well, she's more than capable of holding her own right now, and so what Mark O'Mara's issue here with her is that he needs to establish that there are significant enough injuries that could happen in different ways, consistent with the kind of description that Zimmer has given. Otherwise, he may be placed in a situation where he has minor injuries that cannot be supported and that would not justify the use of deadly force. He's not as worried about the second degree as he is worried about the manslaughter, and this goes to that issue.
Lisa Bloom, let me bring you in quickly before we run back to testimony here. In this cross-examination, Mark O'Mara said to the chief medical examiner, listen, George Zimmerman may have been punched more times and the physical effects of that not visible. For example, being punched in the nose once and then eventually hit where we see the scar. The cross-examiner points out that although Trayvon Martin had no abrasions on his body, that could have applied to him as well in injuries.
And we've seen the defense dialing back in their questions the last couple of days about the extent of George Zimmerman's injuries, using words like panic. Well, he was panicked. He may have exaggerated. He may have innocently overstated the number of times that his head was struck on the concrete. And I think we're going to continue to see that. And they're going to try to reach a middle ground. That certainly some blows were inflicted. His head did impact with the concrete to some extent, probably not as much as he has said in his statements.
In your estimation, is this one of the first witnesses called by the prosecution who's holding up under cross?
Well, she certainly is. She's doing well, but she's also had to concede that when she uses the medical language consistent with, that means his injuries may be consistent with the prosecution theory of the case. They may also be consistent with the defense version of the case. And that's how it is with scientific witnesses. To lawyers like me, they can be aggravating.
All right, we're going to go to another break quickly, and we will be right back with more of the testimony.